Hello, everybody, and welcome to Big Bold You, a show that is dedicated to inspiring every person out there. And yes, I mean you, because you are important, you matter, and we want to make sure each and every one of us is playing bigger in our lives. And one thing that I say all the time is, believe it or not, it is easier to play bigger. For those of us that have done it, we know. And for those of us who are thinking about it, just do it. Just jump off and soar and fly, and let us help you, because you can't do it alone. We want to inspire you to be bolder, which means you are going to have to step out of your comfort zone. You're going to have to talk about things that make you feel a little uncomfortable. You're going to have to do things that probably make you feel a lot uncomfortable. But that is a journey that we take so we can become the best versions of ourselves. I believe that we live in a world where there is a war between good and evil, and it will always be that way. The only way evil wins is when good people don't do enough. So every Monday, 3 p.m. Central, we come to you with open arms, with a heart full of love to inspire each and every one of us to do more in our lives and to highlight an incredible person that is doing some things that really already are stepping out of their comfort zones and adding much value to the world. So without further ado, let me please introduce our special guest today, Michelle Staubach Grimes.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm great.
I am so excited to have you on the show.
I'm so excited.
And let me tell you, I literally just met Michelle recently, and I was with Melissa Plaskoff, who is one of the owners here at On Air Media, and we just started to talk, and you were sharing so much of yourself in such an authentic, amazing, loving way. And the topic of our show, which is really something that you have a lot of experience with, is hope for people and suffering from depression. Mm-hmm. So before we kind of jump into everything that we're doing, just kind of tell people a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm really a Dallas native. I was actually born in Florida.
Uh-huh. And you got out of there as fast as you could.
My dad was serving time in the military still. So I actually was born in Florida, but came to Dallas when I was 1. And so I was raised in Dallas in the public and Catholic schools. And I have 4 siblings, so, big family.
Right. And there's 6 siblings in our family.
Yeah.
And I don't think people realize the impact of the chaos.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't know how it was in y'all's house, but with 6 of us, it was always so loud. Everything was going, it was crazy. And to even have a voice, you literally would have to stand up for your, you did. I mean, I remember one time we went to the mall, and my parents left me at the mall because they didn't remember that they brought me to the mall. And my siblings, they got all the way home before my sister said, "We left Jen's at the mall."
You're like, which is what happens in my first book,
It's what happens.
And yeah, I know. So my dad was an only child. My mom was from 1 of 5, so she got it. My dad kind of was like, I mean, what's wrong? Is something wrong with our kids? Like, are they, because they fight?
Yes, exactly.
And that's just the nature of growing up.
Well, especially in the big family. So this is my second marriage, and it's a blended family. So I have 3 biological kids. 2 bonus kids, so together 5. And my current husband now, he only grew up with 1 sister, and they were a little bit further in age. They weren't super close, so they kind of did their own thing. And it was the same thing when we had all 5 together. Dave was like, "What's wrong with the kids?" I'm like, "This is normal. If they're not screaming and yelling at each other, calling one another names, but then 2 or 3 hours later, they're in the backyard of the pool, buddies having a blast." So,
right.
I mean, it kind of is how it is. So you've really been here the rest of your life.
So, I left for college. I went to school up in Washington, D.C., at a small liberal arts school called Catholic University. And then I stayed there and worked for President Bush 41 in that administration for a year. And then I went back to law school in D.C. And so, but when I graduated law school, it kind of made sense to come home, take the bar, back in Texas.
Right.
And so I did. I came back to Texas and then practiced law a couple of years, did a sports job, was married, raising kids, and then, the last 10 years into writing.
Well, and we got to show these books, and I know that we probably have the book cover on slide, but these, okay, yeah, but it's beautiful. So you've got two books. Where is Pidge? And then Pidge Takes the Stage. And I know that we've got those. Look at that. It's amazing. They're beautiful books. But tell us a little bit about these books and how they came about.
So I journaled a lot, and also was watching my children at the time learn to read and write, which is pretty intriguing because you forget what
right.
It's hard, and then you're like, oh my God, just memorize it. THE. Like you cannot sound it out, you get frustrated, and
right.
It's a skill. So anyways, and then I was attending the Barbara Bush Foundation literacy event every year in Dallas.
Yes.
And authors would speak. And so I had an idea of a nonfiction piece, and I thought, okay, I need to go back to school just at night. Right. My kids were still young, to hone my writing skills. And that led to the SMU program, which was creative writing. And that takes you down the path of writing a novel. So I did that, which the novel is a draft, which I'm going back to. And then I had the story of Pidge, and Pidge is my mom's nickname. So it's named after her.
Right.
And it's she gets lost in the shuffle, big family, but realizes it's really about family, love, validation, and so that's how that story came. And so then I had to study under a children's author and really understand children picture books. And then I wrote the second book, and that's more about following your dreams, working hard, committing, not giving up.
Right.
And that's what when I read at schools, I talk, about those things.
Here's the thing. I think it's so important. And you talk to people in education, and of course, reading to this day, I think that reading is one of the best ROIs that anybody can do in themselves, because we've got to invest in ourselves. And to your point with the kids, you've got to read to them. I can remember at such a young age, my mom, even with all of the craziness with all these kids, she would sit us down and she would read to us, and she would read to us, and she would read to us. And there's to instill in the hearts and souls of kids the importance of reading. That's why I loved Barbara Bush's advocacy, because she really, really understood the importance of it. But then the other thing is, to me, kids are our future. And so every kid has a special place in my heart, because there are a lot of kids that they're not learning, in education, they call them soft skills, like you were saying, the commitment and the self-confidence and the courage. Those are all the soft skills that you have to succeed. There's no way you're going to be able to get through this thing called life. But typical skills that are taught in school are more the hard skills. So the math and everything.
Right.
And even now, you were talking about teaching your kids to read, and you're like, don't sound it out. It's THE is the.
I mean, some you can sound it
right,
out.
but it's kind of like with the math. I mean, I don't know. You're.
Why I don't do the math.
Listen, the new.
I give that to my
new
husband.
Math. Yeah, it's like the new math. I'm like, the new math is crazy. Doesn't even
and they do it on their computer.
I'm like,
my son didn't, all through high school, he didn't even have a book.
I know, it's crazy. I mean, it's insane crazy. I'm like, this new math is it's like, no. I've got a brother who's a chemical engineer, and he says, Jens, you don't even know math anyway. He's like, you just know addition. I mean,
right.
So anyway, but getting back to these books, what inspired you to write about Pidge?
I think Pidge, the first book, Where's Pidge? is probably, I think everyone's got a core story. And I think it's a little bit of my core story. A little bit lost in the shuffle, not sure what she's going to do. You know, where does she fit in her family?
Right.
And, you know, with that, she learns, you know, they tell her how much they care and love for her. And so I think I kind of wrote that a lot from the heart. Pitch Shake to Stage was more about that you need to work hard in life. In order to get somewhere, you need to work hard. I use a quote in there, unspectacular preparation
I love that.
equals spectacular results, which I actually
That's so true.
stole from my dad.
Yeah.
And that's how he described, once I asked him to, he was obviously a professional football player, to describe his training camp. And I thought, you know, and then that's so relevant to all of our life. And
So relevant.
the younger kids, I have to break it down. The older kids, they get it. You know, I see a lot of our day-to-day life is unspectacular.
100%.
But that's, you know, and to use it for him, for his football was, you know, you're going to training camp, you sit-ups, plays, you know, whatever. You do all that in the hopes to prep to win a Super Bowl. And then you have a spectacular result.
Yes.
But only if you've worked hard.
And you know, there's a book called The Slight Edge that was written by a friend of mine, Jeff Olson, and his term is master the mundane, because it's all those mundane things that you have to do on a daily basis, even when you don't want to, even when you feel like you can't. Which, you know, every episode we have an Ask Jen's question, and that's actually one of the questions that we'll be answering later. Is, you know, people, they'll say, when can I stop? And it's like, well, you can take a break and you can rest, but you can't stop. You gotta keep going. And then I don't know how you feel, you know, what your take is, but, you know, I feel like sometimes the work ethic that we grew up in our day and age, it's different than what people experience now, where, you know, being from a big family, I mean, we all had chores. You had to work. You had to pull your load. And I think that sometimes now there's so much leisure, so to speak, with technology that, you know, sometimes I wonder, I mean, are the kids, do they have the same get up and go? And so you got to teach these skills. They have to know that you can't, nothing in life is easy. And then the things that are easy, they don't usually result in anything that you're really proud of. You know? So having a professional athlete as a father, my dad was a professional tennis player, and I can just remember, you know, as a child, we learned from the examples that our parents set and the other adults. But just watching your dad, and what were some of those lessons that you learned that he didn't even have to tell you about?
I mean, he was very, you know, he's very disciplined. So it was very structured. You know, and then people say, was it hard growing up? And it really wasn't. It was the 70s. I mean, I really didn't think my dad was any different than my best friend's dad. He just played football, you know. But I think the commitment, you know, he was in there watching films at night. You know, he was very, and there were things he talked about, you know, if honesty. I mean, if you're 13, you don't say you're 12 to get into the movie theater. Because you know what? It's a slippery slope and a lie. And things like that. They just had, both my parents, very strong morals. And so they lived those. I mean, that's how they lived. You know, they were a couple. They were faithful to each other. They still are. And so they taught us by how they lived. And they're real simple. I mean, they're not into the, you know, whole fame thing. I mean, they never have been.
You know, I think one of the things that, for myself, watching my dad, he always treated everybody like they were just a superstar. And I can remember at a very young age, I'd be with my dad places, and when he would speak to people, the person he was speaking to, they just had a big smile on their face. I mean, and I just thought, I just liked that. I liked how good he was to people. And it didn't matter. I mean, honestly, it didn't matter who the person was. And that's one of the things I learned growing up is we're all created equal. I mean, we truly are. It's just people are in different places of their journey. And I think sometimes we look at people and we think, oh, that person is better than us because they're further along in a certain journey. But that doesn't mean they're better. They're just further along in a certain place of their journey. Now, I've got a friend of mine who is a amazing performer. She sings like there's no tomorrow. So I tell her all the time, I'm like, your vocal cords are a lot more developed than mine. You don't want me singing. You don't even want me to hymn. I mean, honestly, I'm like tone deaf and everything. But that doesn't mean she's better than me. And I think that's something that that with kids, and I love it that, which I'm in the process of writing a book, but I swear to you, ever since I met you, and we'll get into the show topic more, but I love impacting kids' lives.
Yeah.
And I love to, you talk about just what you witnessed. I'm a big for big brothers and big sisters, and just to be with my little, who's a boy, because there's not enough men out there that want to be bigs. So they've got little boys partnered with females. And just the things that I hear him say, to your point about, listen, if you're 12, don't say you're 13 just to get into a movie. And some of the things that he has said, and at times he'll say something and I'll say, but he'll say, well, why does it matter? And it's like, well, because we know. And everything impacts who you are.
Right.
From the little white lie to something worse. And it's not worth it. It's just not worth it in the end. So you've got these books. They're making a tremendous impact on a lot of children's lives. But one of the things that you've been real candid with is your own personal struggle with depression, and that there's hope for depression. And kind of tell us about that journey, how that's been and how that's impacted everything that you've done in your life.
So I've struggled with, since I was a child. I mean, my parents knew something was off when I was, kind of 10, 11, and took me to try to get some help. They just didn't know enough then.
No.
Psychiatrists didn't know enough. There wasn't medication. But I was definitely depressed. I mean, I went back and saw that psychiatrist, and she said, you were definitely depressed. And then, depression can cycle even without treatment. Not all. And look, this is me personally. I'm not a doctor. Exactly. I'm not an expert. Right. This is my experience. And then I probably had some, an episode in high school and in law school, and I was able to, kind of power through. I talked to my intern as I was having children. I talked to my internist about it, and she said, Michelle, you've got kind of this history. You really probably should get a diagnosis or, see someone. And so it was probably, it was my mid-30s when I really addressed it and started seeing a psychiatrist but still quite didn't understand it, took some, medications that help. And then, you have an ebb and flow, and it's hard to know always too, when you're just in a downtime versus a real downtime.
Right.
So, but it's something, I was always aware of. And then, the summer of 2017, I really, hit a tough spot. And probably before that, I did hit a really tough spot when the kids were younger, but was able to get through it with medication. And then this last time, year and a half, almost 2 years ago, it got pretty bad and deep. And so I went through the ECT treatments, which are the, some people think very controversial. I mean, they're very, look, doctors don't know why they work. I mean, yes, it's your last resort because you are put to sleep and you're basically given a seizure.
Right.
And you do a series of treatments. And, you can do them on an outpatient basis. And, it's pretty high, 80 to 90% rate of it brings people out of their depression.
Right.
But the crazy thing, they don't know why, you know?
Well, the fascinating thing to me is the study of the brain.
Yeah.
And I've just been fascinated with it for years because number one, our whole life revolves around what's happening in our brain. I mean, everything. And so, again, we talked about reading, and I have a book of the month, and I've decided, listen, the book of the month that we had in January is still going to be the book of the month in February because I had so many people talk about it. But one of the things, and this is crazy because, Napoleon Hill, this was written in the 1800s, a long, long time ago. And I am a faith-based person. And to me, when you read about, things in Napoleon Hill, Wallace Wattles, Henry Ford, Andrew Carnegie, all roads to me lead to God. I mean, you read and to be so early in how he emphasizes the impact of the mind, because we've got our conscious mind, we've got our subconscious mind, the way that things, just like the ground is wired for wired for weeds. I mean, it is. The ground is wired for weeds. And if you've ever tried to have a flower garden, any type of garden, you've got to mow your lawn because the earth is wired for weeds. Well, our brains are wired for negativity. And that's just a normal brain that doesn't have anything that is not functioning properly. A normal brain is wired for negativity. So here we've got a normal brain wired for negativity. And being a faith-based person, I just believe that God did that for us to turn to him, because we can't make it without him. And so, it's one of the reasons why we turn to him, because if we could do it all by ourselves, we would, but we can't.
Right.
But we can't. And it's kind of like he's got to say, I told you can't do it by yourself. I think about your kids, where your kids they'll come up with some great idea. What they're thinking isn't really going to work, but you're like, okay, just go try it out, because you want them to figure it out on their own. But then they'll always come back to you and say, hey, hold on a second, I need some help. Yeah. And I think that's really why our brains are. So that's a normal functioning brain. But nothing's perfect in our lives. Nothing is perfect in our universe. So just like there's mistakes or errors or things that, you're going to have things. And, we talked briefly about how, my mother, all her life has struggled with mental health issues. But it was back in the day, like you said, that people didn't talk about depression. People didn't talk about mental health issues. People didn't really even understand or know. And so she went her whole life without being diagnosed. And it wasn't until the 6 kids, we were adults, that we could look back and say, she wasn't operating with normal faculties. And and of course there's it's hard because you don't know, they don't know, you don't know, and it's confusing. And then my older sister has struggled with depression and a lot of other mental health issues, but she's been so open to talk and to share, because there's so many people that are struggling with this, so many people. And so for you, at what point did you think, or did you think there are other people that are like me? Or did you think, I think I might be the only person like this? I mean, that's, as you're growing up as a child, how would you know?
Yeah, as a kid, I don't think you do know. You're not sure what's going on. And there wasn't a lot of, just knowledge and explanation, I think, that someone could tell me. So, but as the older I got, and then you realize, the more, the more you're around it, the more people you meet that have struggled, you realize that it's a bigger problem than people think, and it's really, should just be treated like you have cancer, you have this, and talked about. And there's a lot of great groups that are really trying to do that and take the stigma away from it.
You know, my sister, she says it's like diabetes to her. I mean, and that's what she says. She's like, if you were a diabetic, every day you would take insulin. So your pancreas and your body would act properly function the way you need to. And that's how she, you know, it's exactly what she talks about with her depression is, you know, when she said it's something that, to your point, it ebbs and flows. And she, along her journey, you know, you just become more aware. I mean, you become more aware of what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and then what people are good for you, what people aren't good for you.
Right.
I mean, she said, I mean, she's like, look, just like you know, she's like, as a diabetic, there's food that will trigger certain reactions and responses to your body. She said, believe me, there are certain people. Yeah. I mean, she's like, and when I meet one of those people, I'm like, bye, you know, not because they're not good people, but she's like, it's a trigger for her. And, you know, so one of the things that in my previous career, I worked in medicine and non-clinical, but worked for a hospital. And one of the things I learned when I was there, and I think it's really important, is in medicine, they call it a practice because it's not an exact science. Right. And every doctor is going to practice a little bit differently. And when I was looking over your points, you talk a little bit about, you know, finding the right treatment, finding the right doctor. What was your journey like with that?
Right. Yeah. It's you know, that's kind of a hit or miss. You know, it's a practice of medicine, first of all. They still just don't know enough about the brain. I mean, you know, obviously, they're trying to study, you know, Alzheimer, everything, but, the mental health, you know, they're not sure the serotonin. I mean, you hear
all these different things. Exactly.
Right. And then, you know, there's a zillion medicines out there, right? The pharmaceutical companies push, and then doctors, you know, try to figure out. It's a lot of trial. I mean, honestly, it's trial and error, and that's nobody's fault.
No,
I mean, it is because there is geno testing you can do. That may say these medicines might work better for you, but that's, you know, it's not black or white. So it's kind of trial and error. And like, I don't know how he exactly says it, but as my psychiatrist said, he comes from like a family. His dad was his brothers, and it's not that, gosh, I wish I need to get the exact quote, but essentially what he's saying is it works as long as there's that there's the patient doctor or therapist relationship. If that's not there, it's not going to work. Right. And so many people force it. And I always tell my friends that with their kids, if your child says, I don't want to go, don't send them.
Okay, that's good
advice.
There's
a zillion therapists out there. Yeah. And you know what? My daughter saw one, and she's like, Mom, it was horrible. Well, I mean, that is no good.
No.
And there's a zillion, and she found one she loved, you know?
I think that's such a good piece of advice, because here's what I see. And for me, it's different because I worked in and around doctors. And like we were talking earlier, to me, everybody's the same. And so it is what it is, and you find the right fit. But there are a lot of people that think, golly, if the doctor says this is exactly what I have to do. But really, we are our own best doctors in reality.
Right.
I mean,
your own advocate.
Yes. Yeah. You got to go with your gut. And I always say that's your spiritual instinct, basically telling you when something is right and when something's not right. And you got to trust it. I mean, you're given that feeling and that inspiration for a reason. And so you got to say, okay, if it feels right, then I'm going to go with it. And if it doesn't feel right, you can't. Right. You know, trust that. And I think it's important, too, that you said you really do need somebody, because you can't succeed in anything in life by yourself. So you're surely not going to be able to succeed. I mean, and I know I have a counselor that I go to when I want a different perspective. You know, it's like we can't see what we can't see. We don't know what we don't know. And when we're thinking something, I mean, and believe me, I'll say, I know this is the way I'm thinking about it. And I know because I'm thinking about it this way, this is how I'm feeling. but I'm sure there's a different perspective. But you sometimes if you go to your friends, they'll tell you the same perspective as yours because that's why your friends don't get along. But then I'll go to this guy and he'll say, well, and he'll just gives me a different perspective. And then you can think about it and say, okay, that makes sense to me. And you're more open. But yeah, medication alone isn't, it's not going to work. It's not going to work.
No, you need.
Michelle's like, no.
You know, and so you just have to, And so there is a little bit of trial and error in it, and there's really no getting around that.
And and here's another thing. Does it not blow your mind that there hasn't been more research on the brain? That of all the organs of the body, it's the least researched organ. Now things are changing and they're doing a lot more research and everybody's different. So like you were saying earlier, there's no way that what works exactly for one person, the medication or the lack of medication or their exercise or what, the treatment, it's going to be different for each person because each person is different. But the fact that there's just of all the organs of the body, it's the least researched. And it's exciting though, because, Princeton University is actually one of the top 3 research universities in the world, and they've been doing a ton of research. In fact, our skin cells and our brain cells are most closely related than any other organ. And the research that they're doing with skin cells and brain cells is crazy. So, I think that there is hope, which is another thing that when I was saying, okay, what are some really talking points? That was one of the ones you said, hope. I mean, what does hope mean to you, done for you, and in your journey and in your future?
Well, I think, knowing that there is a way out, it normally doesn't last forever. There are those that struggle with treatment-resistant depression, which is real challenging. I have a friend that just went to Boston to see a specialist up there. And unfortunately that can be very tough when you the medicine, the therapy,
nothing's working.
Right. So, but I think it's like the hope, that I talk about, the quote with Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning, that, he talks about, suffering. It's not useless.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%.
There's a point to suffering. And here he was, in a prison camp as a, prisoner of the Nazis. And really what he saw was those that had hope and could see beyond, which quite frankly, the chances still were probably pretty slim, but were able, to survive a little bit better than those who didn't. Not critiquing those who didn't. You just, once you, let's be honest.
Yeah.
You're on a train. It goes this way or that way, right?
Right.
So, but that's real interesting how he talks about his hope is the hope that he would see his wife is what kept him alive.
What's amazing is, to me, it's hope and gratitude, where, like you said, one of the reasons I do my Laughter is the Best Medicine segment is because nothing lasts forever. And, your bad times don't last forever. They're just not going to. Even if it's a long time, it's not going to last forever. But your good times don't last forever either. And that's one of the things where, I'll see people, and I don't ever think doom and gloom. I'm a very positive person. But, when things are going great, I'm like, this is awesome and this is amazing. But I'm going to prepare because it's not always going to be going great either. And I think it helps you manage life better, because it's not if the struggles are going to happen. It's not if the bad things are going to happen. They are going to happen, but it's going to be a length of time, because you do have that hope that it will get better, and it always does, you know. And I think that's one of the, we talk about one of your other favorite quotes from John Watson: "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle." And that was something that I had shared with Michelle, that I just think every interaction that we have with people, and human interaction is so vitally important, but it has to end in love. Even the hard discussions, the conversations we don't want to have, but you still have to end them in love, because you don't know what people are struggling with behind the smile, behind closed doors. And so many times they won't share it, you know? And I think that's one of the reasons why I love this type of platform, and so many other, philanthropy platforms, and just church and faith-based platforms, where it's telling people, you are special, you are loved, you do matter. And we just have to be so much more aware of what people are going through, and be kind. I mean, for heaven's sakes, just be kind,
right.
you know? I mean, it's like, I recently had a good friend of mine her and her husband got divorced, and I was talking to her soon-to-be ex, and I said, just be kind. I mean, okay, you don't want to be married anymore. Okay. You want to go do your own. Okay. Just be nice.
Right.
Just be kind, So with everything that you've gone through in your life, and, good, bad, indifferent, ugly, what's one of your biggest life lessons or takeaway?
Wow. From everything I've gone through, one of my biggest life lessons, takeaways, I would say, to continue to follow your dreams, even when you're, kind of beaten down, told you're not going to get there. And really, I think you're right. Be kind. I mean, makes a huge difference.
Such a big difference.
To just whoever you interact with during the day.
And this leads us to really being aware that we just got to be kind. You just got to be kind. Be kind, everybody. Be kind. We're going to close up with our Laughter is the Best Medicine video, because this is, to me, you just got to laugh. I mean, you got to laugh. And this is hysterical to me. Yesterday was the Super Bowl. So let's see one of my favorite all-time personal football players that I love and know so dearly.
Hey, watch, I'm gonna go knock out that Patriots, man.
2 hours later.
I'm gonna go knock this mask out.
I love Jamal Adams. We love you. We love you, George, Michelle, and the whole gang. And we love you too, Michelle. Thank you so much for coming. Please, everybody, go out and get these books. They're amazing. I'm just going to buy a bunch of them, and every person I know I'm going to give them to, because I think they're not just good for kids, they're good for us.
Yeah.
Because we're kids at heart. So again, please go out and make a positive difference in the world. Join us next Monday at 3 p.m. Central. And until then, be big, be bold, and be you. Bye-bye.